I'm very happy that we have another event today, this symposium, and this time about neighborhoods. This is not the first event in the cooperation between Canada and the Netherlands.
It's really with a lot of excitement. I think, this is really important. This kind of work is relevant and really important to making progress in what we're able to do to build better communities.
We had this first workshop in September. Bill Reese talked about the concept of the ecological footprint. This method has become well known around the world, and he put it to us very clearly that with a global population of over 7 billion and a biocapacity of about 1.7 global hectares, the average ecological footprint is 2.7 global hectares. So we actually have an overshoot of about 1.0 global hectares, or about 58%. And Bill's perspective is, it doesn't matter what you say about sustainability, if you are not addressing this, we're in big trouble. Jenny Moore, who just finished her dissertation at UBC working with Bill, has looked at this concept of one planet living. What would it mean to live within that global biocapacity for the city of Vancouver? And she's identified in her work this gap. This is this 1.7 one planet living, that if we all lived at that level, we could go on sustainably, indefinitely. Now, the Foundation for Sustainable Area Development talked about their method of assessing, and they have a kind of a rapid assessment tool that connects universities and businesses and local governments with a graphic representation of assessment results. And then they presented their results to the workshop, to the seminar in September. So that's just a little bit of background of some of the discussion we had in September. Hopefully you won't feel like you're completely lost as we move forward.
I'm working at Telos, and Telos has been founded in 1999 at Dunefield University, actually as a result of a planning process, a visioning process in the province of North Brabant. Our task was to develop a monitoring device to see how regions, municipalities, neighborhoods are performing from the perspective of sustainable development. And we used a three capital model. We make a distinction between the three capitals: the economic, the social, cultural, and the ecological capital. Basic framework is we have capitals. Theory helps us to divide them in a number of stocks, that you might say, the main elements of how a capital is developing. And the most important thing in our vision is to define the long-term goals, how each of these stocks should develop in the long run. We have three different applications of this, you might say, of this conceptual framework. We measure the balance sheet for ex post monitoring. We have developed a PPP scan, and there's also developed a CC scan, a community capital scan. What we try to do in our approach is to combine expert knowledge in our project, because we think that sustainable development has a political and normative aspect in it. And what we have been trying to do is we try to go beyond boundaries, because that's what sustainable development is also about. Thank you.
Our aim was really to connect intent with impact. So the question we asked, and the gap we're trying to fill, is, well, can we measure that actual performance at a neighborhood scale, and then connect what we think should have real impacts with the impacts that we're actually seeing on the ground? We chose to do this at the neighborhood scale because it's a nice spot where grassroots action actually connects with government policy. It's a scale at which individuals can get together and do a bit more than just their own small things, and a scale at which you can actually see policy land and create something different on your street, in your neighborhood. We built it around Mark's community capital tool. It's an asset-based and community development framework. So as John was saying, this isn't about just monitoring stuff or measuring and comparing. It's about looking at what we can and should do to develop our communities. It's about focusing effort in different areas, using our resources more wisely. the concept of the community capital tool is simple. We're trying to build capital or build equity. And equity is assets minus liabilities. The work we've done so far, we think the tool can be used in many ways, and I think I've mentioned these. A baseline assessment for neighborhood planning or municipal policy making, a post-occupancy assessment for a green neighborhood. And as I said earlier, I think this is a starting point for having the conversations John talked about with stakeholders, with residents and businesses. So thank you very much. I'll turn it back over to Mark.
These presentations have helped me to understand, the project a little bit more and what it's aiming to do. So I guess just a couple of thoughts come to mind about the tools that you're talking about, and I think that some of the places I think that we could potentially use them are in some of these broad planning strategies that we're doing, like the environmental strategy. We're also updating our OCP right now, and of course we have community plans that are updated as we go along. And I would just be curious, before sort of recommending to my managers or council that we use a tool like this. Obviously, as a scientist, I'd want to understand more about the tool and the assumptions that are underlying and how transparent it is. And then sort of the political side is trying to understand, are there concerns about when you map out the neighborhoods and you identify problem areas, how much of a concern is that sort of politically? Is that something that is there reluctance to try to highlight, I guess, problems in your community, and particularly if they're problems that the city can't necessarily do anything about in the short term, or maybe doesn't have jurisdiction about?
So a lot of people in this room know about the University project, but just a lot of people don't know really what we are, how we operate, and why we try to do what we try to do. Our strategy is incremental sustainable growth. And through incremental sustainable growth, it's trying to measure what that growth is and where sustainability will take us in the future. So what have we done, where are we now, and where are we going? And that's where we get really interested in assessment tools. So we've probably looked at every assessment tool at the neighborhood scale under the rainbow. We've looked at One Planet Living, we've looked at LEAD NP, we've looked at the community capital, we've done the FSA approach with the Dutch students that were here a while ago. We've made up some of our own. We've looked at some hokey ones. And what we found is really there's nothing that has invested itself in telling the story of the community from a social experience, from a neighborhood experience, from a green building experience, from an environmental experience, and that sort of that holistic kind of approach, until we started looking into the community capital tool and the FSA tool and starting to see the overlaps between those tools.
I'm Davis, I'm the sustainability manager for the city of Port Louis, which is undergoing quite a bit of change right now. In terms of the model and the tool, I think one of the strengths of that tool is helping to reinforce a conversation of sustainability, that it's not just environment, and it's not just economy, and it's not the trade-offs between those different buckets.
Neil Valentine from the city of North Vancouver, is a city that does take sustainability to heart, build on Mark's and many others who've contributed to that, the 6 components, the full, complete sustainability framework. I think our challenge now is the neighborhoods, it's about communities, it's about social. We're a denser city, we're like the West, Vancouver, we're small.